slavery in America. A story too powerful, too shocking to have ever been.
What a stink, Captain. What did you bring, a cargo of rotten meat?
All the passion of the explosive novel that sold over 9.5 million copies has now been brought to the screen.
Mandingo! Kill Fred Mandingo!
Mandingo.
4,000! I'll pay more, 500 more!
This my story. You attacked me. You raped me. So now, listen, you do what I want. I'm gonna tell him everything.
What man you had it for me?
Where'd you get that zany notion from?
You thinking I don't know a virgin when I sleeps with one and pleasures?
I was too a virgin.
You was once it, but not last night.
He didn't mean nothing bad. Please, Hammond, don't do
Don't
it.
you tell me what to do. Don't you think you get in my bed, you're anything but a nigger. Now get out of my way.
Now, sweetie. Yes,
sir. What a wonderful
But please,
day.
don't fling me in
Plenty of
that.
sunshine.
Now, look here, you keep out there saying all your business.
My way.
Leave out hanging. That's it. I'll hang you. Hang you out of neck till he's dead.
Total for 3 years of law school.
Wait a second, look at this. Full tuition for the most qualified applicant.
Most qualified black applicant. $53,979.
Congratulations, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, sir. I'll do my best.
These are the 80s, man. It's the Cosby decade.
For Mark Watson, all it took was a little soul.
I'd like to meet...
The sunshine's wet, but I know where the sunshine.
For the title screen, we see a black guy lost in the white suburbs, a metaphor for what's to come.
You got me out here in this creepy, confusing ass suburb.
Get Out takes aim at white liberals. Get Out follows Chris Washington as he meets his white girlfriend's parents for the first time. While the first half of the film explores white liberals awkwardly attempting social interaction with a black man, the second half of the film takes a pretty horrific turn after we find out that the party hosted by Rose's parents is in fact a slave auction of sorts. We learn an even more terrifying truth. An old white man wants his brain implanted inside of Chris's body.
You have been chosen because of the physical advantages you've enjoyed your entire lifetime. With your natural gifts and our determination, we could both be part of something greater. Something perfect.
The second act exposes Chris to a bunch of white people all fascinated with Chris's blackness. Party guests want to know what it's like to be black in America and even feel compelled to tell him that
Black is in fashion.
they're reminding him that he's black, thus only making him feel more different.
Gordon was a professional golfer for years.
Oh, you kidding? Well, I can't quite swing the hips like I used to, though. But, I do know Tiger.
This also leads to a situation where any actual racism can be excused as long as they can show how down they are with black culture and anti-racist ideas.
Come on, I get it. White family, black servants, it's a total cliche.
There's a term for white fascination with black culture that can help us better understand Get Out: negrophilia. The term emerged in 1920s Paris to describe the craze for black culture amongst the hipsters of the day. Writer Patrine Archer-Straw writes that for these young Parisians, blackness was a sign of modernity.
Such a privilege to be able to experience another person's culture. You know what I'm saying?
But this had a problematic flip side. Black personalities were either lionized or demonized in a manner that denied normality. In other words, they could never be, actual people, and instead existed as one of two stereotypes: brilliant artists or uncultured animals. Throughout the film, we see both sides of this. Chris is celebrated for his cultural background, yet as the creepy brother reminds us,
If you really pushed your body, you'd be a fucking beast.
To paraphrase Archer-Straw, in both cases, it's the white perspective that decides how black people are defined. And this negrophilia isn't just confined to the desire for black culture. It can be the desire for the black body itself, both sexually.
So, is it true? Is it better?
Well,
and athletically.
So Chris, what's your sport?
And while you might be tempted to think, is it so bad to be desired because you're sexy and strong? Well, the answer is yeah. Negrophilia isn't about truly understanding black people and their culture. It's about using them to satisfy your own desires. This is not understanding humans, it's collecting them. It leaves Chris anxiously trying to navigate this overwhelmingly white space.
If there's too many white people, I get nervous, you know.
Philosopher Frantz Fanon described his own similar experience as a black man living in 20th century France. Fanon described meeting the white man's eyes as placing a burdensome weight upon him, one that left him feeling uncomfortable in his own body, and out of place in a world dominated by whiteness.
Now you're in the sunken place.
This is the name for a hypnotic state in which one's mind is separated from their body, and they are left to passively view their own experiences through a screen. When asked about the meaning of the sunken place, Jordan Peele tweeted that the sunken place means we're marginalized. No matter how hard we scream, the system silences us. According to this logic, any society built upon inequality will inevitably leave those on the outside without a voice, or at best, with a tempered version of their voice. One's true identity has to remain in the background for the sake of going with the flow. We can understand the sunken place better with some help from sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois, who coined the term double consciousness. According to Du Bois, double consciousness is the internal conflict experienced by African Americans living in a structurally racist society. These societal conditions lead black people to see themselves through the perspective of the dominant societal force, in this case, white people. Chris is repeatedly evaluated by the measuring tape of white society, and in particular, certain forms of white desire. The experience of being constantly examined leads to what Du Bois calls a two-ness of the black soul. One feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro. Two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. This imposition leads to confusion about the authenticity of one's experiences.
She got in my head, and now I'm thinking all this fucked up shit that I don't want to think about.
And for Chris, this double consciousness has left him feeling like a helpless spectator. If you are wondering why Chris seems to be haunted by the deer he and Rose killed, it may not be because he's some kind of PETA activist, but because watching helplessly as a living thing died probably reminded him of his mother's death. In other words, the sunken place seems not only to be a hypnosis technique, but a metaphor for his own life as a helpless spectator. This fear of losing oneself is made literal in the coagula procedure, in which black consciousness is literally pushed to the background to make room for the white mind. Thus, he risks being permanently cast into the sunken place. Chris is able to avoid this fate by plugging his ears with cotton picked from his chair, which brings to mind poet Audre Lorde's famous insistence that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. For Lorde, this meant that it was futile for the oppressed to use the logic of the oppressor in their attempts at resistance. Instead, Get Out suggests the opposite. Chris uses a type of labor associated with slavery, picking cotton, to assert his own identity and avoid a type of slavery. Chris not only uses cotton to avoid bodily colonization, he repurposes a bocce ball, arguably a symbol of the white elite, to take out Jeremy. And calling back to the symbol of Chris's spectatorship, Chris takes a mounted deer and goes straight for Dean's jugular with it, a sign he's overcome the powerlessness he once feared. Chris's emancipation from this near enslavement can be seen as a radical assertion of his black identity. While the film's most terrifying scene comes from an unexpected source. We all know what's likely to happen if the police show up and see a black man kneeling over the bleeding body of a white woman. While the film's intended ending was this devastating worst-case scenario, Peele opted for a more triumphant conclusion in the final cut. But the moment between the police sirens and Rod getting out of the car is a stark reminder that the real monster of Get Out isn't a fictional boogeyman, but rather the horrors of the system itself, something that cannot be heroically defeated at the conclusion of a film.